What is my favorite deck of all time?
What is my favorite deck of all time?
What is your favorite deck of all time?
My favorite deck of all time would have to be Consume, Beta Consume, before it became, very degenerate with playing as many neckers as you possibly could. There was a period where the deck was very much fluid, but not too degenerate in what it was doing, and that's kind of how I made a name, I guess, for myself. In the early days, I made a Consume deck guide with my own kind of personal spin on it, and yeah.
Not Consume, although it's close. I think my favorite decks could be Promote Hanseld, which was a deck that not many of you might remember. It's way back. In pre-Homecoming Gwent, I would say the other two decks that are really good in open beta were Spelatel and Nilfgaard Handbuff. Like strongly synergistic decks that played a lot of tall units. And recently, I think that Draug right now is what I really missed in Gwent. Draug is a great deck. It gives you so many options to outplay your opponent, and the skill cap on the deck is just insane.
I started playing more seriously in Homecoming, and the deck that I have had the most fun with is probably some form of NR engines, NR charges with pincer maneuver. I really enjoyed those combos. I know some people don't like that type of deck, but engines were really fun when they were around.
My favorite deck of all time would have to be Brand Discard that I built last year, around March time, 2019. It was just a really fun deck, tier 1 deck. Not an easy deck to play, but the fact that it was a deck that I'd made that was just really, really good made it even more fun to play. So that one probably takes the top of the list.
My favorite deck of all time might be the old Kedveni Revenant deck. Kedveni Revenant used to be an engine that you played on the row, and then whenever you played a spell, it would create a copy of itself and spawn it in the same row. So back then, when we had 3 rows in the game, you could play like Revenants on all 3 rows, and then every spell would be generating extra Revenants, and you would spam your entire board, fill your entire board with Revenants while slinging some spells. It was not very competitive at all, but it was a very fun deck for me.
My favorite deck of all time, I think it has to be separated between before Homecoming and after Homecoming, because it's basically 2 different games. But in terms of before Homecoming, my favorite deck was Spy Nilfgaard. I like Spy mechanics a lot, and I'm really hyped to see it return in the new expansion. But after Homecoming, my favorite deck is I think Wildcard. Now, granted, Wildcard is not a deck, but really a leader ability. But I think pretty much all variations of the Wildcard has been pretty much similar in the past, with Gradient and Slender being a staple in deck. So I think I'll say Wildcard is my favorite deck.
My favorite deck of all time has to be Sabrina and Iris combination from Beta, because it was just an absolutely mental combo, and it's pretty much all I played, losing most of the games, but when it worked, it was just an absolute joy.
My favorite deck was the Camby Queensguard deck. You would throw Camby to the other side of your opponent's board. It would get killed by a ship or a bear or whichever unit that did that at that time. It would kill their side of the board, and then you could summon a whole bunch of Queensguards. I had a lot of fun playing that deck.
It's a difficult one to answer. I think it's a bit of a toss-up. It's either going to be Great Swords from Open Beta or Nilfgaard Spies. Both those decks I really, really enjoyed. Definitely my 2 favorite decks of all time. And I especially liked Nilfgaard Spies due to how complex it was and how it really rewarded you for playing it well, where if you play it badly, it can be a terrible deck, but if you played it very well, it was one of the best decks at the time. So it just all came down to how the player played. And I also quite enjoyed Great Swords as well, because Great Swords was very similar in fashion, where if you played very well, it was a very strong deck and could even beat a lot of the bad matchups if played very, very well. So definitely 2 of my favorite decks of all time coming back from Open Beta.
One of my favorite decks of all time in Gwent is the Axeman deck. Now, Axemen used to do what Greatswords do now. When you damaged your opponent, they would boost. But it was during beta, so you could have up to 3 Axemen on the board. Now with Greatswords, it kind of feels like you resurrect a Greatsword or you play a Greatsword in the final turn and then you use Wild Boar of the Sea. Whereas then you would have multiple Greatswords on the board. You would then play cards like Ard to push units back and stack rows. You would play cards like Okvis to damage everything. And you would also play Blue Boy Lugos. And what Blue Boy Lugos did was he would spawn a whale. Well, thank you. And the whale would jump between the rows randomly and damage everything on the row by 1 every turn. And your opponent could kind of stop this by damaging the whale or locking the whale. But the way that it kind of played out is if you could get that synergy going, your Axemen would just grow bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was just such a fun, synergistic deck to play. And it was one of my favorite decks of all time.
As I was a SK main back in beta, I also really loved Northern Realms. But Skellige was always a love for mine since very early days. Rest in peace, King Bran. Discard, that was the discard element of King Bran I was just absolutely in love with. My favorite version of it was probably the Ekimara Doragiri. It was broken, but I absolutely loved it. That's when I had transitioned from PlayStation 4 Gwent to PC Gwent, and that was my first season on PC, so I had to start with a very select collection. So I started from the beginning, rank 30, built that King Bran deck, and I ran almost an 80% win rate to 1, or maybe 2 wins away from Pro Ladder. So yeah, it was definitely my favorite deck.